The morning air was cool and crisp as Thomas walked through Riverside Park, his usual Saturday routine. He'd always loved this place. The old oak trees, the sound of children laughing on the swings, the way the sunlight filtered through the leaves. It was his escape from the chaos of his weekday job as a therapist at the Children's Development Center downtown. But something was different that morning. Something that made him slow his pace and look twice. There, on a wooden bench near the playground, sat a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. She wore a pink jacket that was slightly too big for her, and her small hands gripped a white cane that rested against her knees. What struck Thomas most wasn't the cane, though. It was the look on her face. She sat perfectly still while other children ran and played just a few feet away. Their shouts and laughter filled the air, but she might as well have been sitting in a completely different world. Her head turned slightly toward the sounds, but she didn't move, didn't try to join in, just sat there alone. Thomas had worked with enough children to recognize loneliness when he saw it. This wasn't a child who wanted to be alone. This was a child who didn't know how to be anything else. He stopped walking and watched for a moment, debating with himself. Should he approach? Would it be appropriate? The last thing he wanted was to seem like some stranger bothering a vulnerable child. But his instincts, the same ones that made him good at his job, told him something was wrong here before he could decide. The little girl's head turned in his direction, as if she somehow sensed his presence. "Hello?" she called out softly. Her voice was small and uncertain. Thomas stepped closer, keeping his voice gentle. "Hi there. I'm Thomas. Are you okay? Are you here with someone?" The girl's face brightened just slightly. "My mom went to get us hot chocolate. She said to wait right here and not move." "That sounds nice. Hot chocolate on a cool morning like this is perfect," Thomas said, crouching down so he was closer to her level. Though he knew she couldn't see him, something told him it still mattered. "I'm guessing you're pretty good at waiting, huh?" She nodded, a small smile appearing. "Mom says I'm very good at following directions. She says it's important because—" She trailed off, her smile fading. "Because it keeps you safe," Thomas finished gently. "Yeah." There was something in that single word that broke his heart a little. Such a heavy burden for such small shoulders. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lily," she said. Then, after a pause, "Do you come to this park a lot? I haven't heard your voice before." Thomas was about to answer when a sharp voice cut through the air. "Lily, who are you talking to?" He looked up to see a woman striding toward them, 2 paper cups in her hands and alarm written all over her face. She was probably in her early 30s with dark hair pulled back tightly, and eyes that looked like they hadn't fully rested in years. Her expression wasn't just worried. It was suspicious, guarded. Thomas stood up quickly, raising his hand slightly in a non-threatening gesture. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you. I was just— Lily, didn't I tell you not to talk to strangers?" The woman set the cups down on the bench and placed a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. "But Mom, he seemed nice. He was just saying hello." "I don't care how nice he seemed," the woman said firmly, though her voice softened slightly when she addressed her daughter. Then her eyes fixed on Thomas, cold and assessing. "Thank you for your concern, but we're fine." It wasn't a thank you. It was a dismissal. Thomas nodded slowly. "Of course. I understand. I just saw Lily sitting here and wanted to make sure she was okay. I work with children, so we don't need any help," the woman interrupted. "But thank you." The words were polite, but the tone left no room for argument. Thomas could see the walls around this woman. They were high and thick, built from something painful. He recognized that too. He'd seen it before in parents who'd been hurt or disappointed too many times. "Have a good day," he said quietly, and walked away. But he couldn't stop thinking about them as he continued his walk. About the little girl's lonely posture on that bench. About the mother's frightened, defensive eyes. Something about the whole scene stayed with him, settling into his chest like a weight. Later that afternoon, Thomas stopped by the small coffee cart near the park entrance. Jerry, the vendor who'd been running that cart for at least a decade, was wiping down his counter. "Hey, Jerry," Thomas said, ordering his usual afternoon coffee. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure thing. What's on your mind?" "There was a woman and a little girl in the park this morning. The girl had a white cane. Do you know them?" Jerry's expression shifted to something sad. "Oh, you mean Victoria and Lily Hayes? Yeah, they come here every Saturday morning like clockwork. Have been for about 6 months now. What's their story?" Thomas asked, immediately feeling guilty for prying. but something told him he needed to understand. Jerry leaned against his cart, lowering his voice. Sad situation. The husband died about 2 years ago. Car accident. Real tragedy. The little girl was in the car too. Lost her sight from the injuries. From what I hear, the mom hasn't been the same since. Used to be real friendly, always smiling. Now she barely says 2 words to anyone. Just brings the girl here, they sit on that same bench, and then they leave. Every single week, Thomas felt his chest tighten. That explains so much. The mother's fear, her walls, her need to control everything around her daughter. She'd lost her husband and watched her daughter lose her sight. What kind of weight would that put on a person? Does the girl interact with anyone? Thomas asked. Jerry shook his head. Nope. Just sits there with her mom. I've seen other kids try to talk to her a few times, but the mom always pulls her away. I think she's scared something else will happen. Can't say I blame her after what they've been through. Thomas paid for his coffee and thanked Jerry, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought about Lily's smile when he'd spoken to her. How quickly she'd responded. How eager she'd been for just a moment of connection. He thought about Victoria's haunted eyes, the way she'd positioned herself between him and her daughter like a shield. They were both trapped, he realized. Trapped by grief, by fear, by walls that were meant to protect but were actually just isolating them both. For the rest of the day, Thomas couldn't shake them from his thoughts. That night, lying in bed, he made a decision. He'd go back to the park next Saturday. He wouldn't push, wouldn't intrude, but he'd be there. Maybe they didn't think they needed help. Maybe Victoria would hate him for it. But that little girl needed something her mother couldn't give her right now. She needed to know the world wasn't just a dangerous place to be endured. She needed to know there was still joy and connection and possibility. And maybe, just maybe, her mother needed to remember that too. Thomas didn't know it then, but that decision would change all 3 of their lives in ways none of them could imagine. The following Saturday, Thomas arrived at the park earlier than usual. He told himself he wasn't being weird about it. He was just going for his normal walk. The fact that he'd chosen a bench with a clear view of where Lily and Victoria usually sat was just a coincidence. At least that's what he tried to convince himself. Around 10 o'clock, he saw them walking down the path. Victoria held Lily's hand firmly, guiding her carefully around every crack in the sidewalk, every raised root, every potential danger. They moved slowly, deliberately. When they reached their usual bench, Victoria helped Lily sit down with such careful precision that it almost looked rehearsed. Thomas watched from a distance, not wanting to intrude. He pulled out a book he'd brought, pretending to read while keeping them in his peripheral vision. About 20 minutes passed. Lily sat completely still, her hands folded in her lap. Occasionally she'd tilt her head toward a sound, a bird calling or children laughing, but she never moved from her spot. Victoria sat rigid beside her, staring straight ahead at nothing in particular. It was the saddest thing Thomas had ever seen. He closed his book and made a decision. Walking casually, he took a path that would lead him past their bench. As he approached, he started talking. Not directly to them, but loud enough to be heard. Wow, listen to that robin. Must be calling to its mate? They have such a distinctive chirp, don't they? Kind of like a cheerful whistle. He saw Lily's head turn sharply toward his voice. A small smile appeared on her face. That's the music man, Mom, she whispered excitedly. The one from last week? Victoria's body tensed. She turned to look at Thomas, her expression guarded but not quite as hostile as before. Maybe she recognized him. Maybe she was just too tired to put up the same fight. Thomas stopped walking and gave a small wave, even though only Victoria could see it. Good morning. Beautiful day, isn't it? Yes, it is, Victoria said carefully, still watching him like she wasn't sure what he wanted. The birds are especially active today, Thomas continued, keeping his tone light and conversational. That robin I mentioned, and I heard a cardinal earlier too. They sound completely different. The cardinal is more like a sharp whistle, almost like someone calling a dog. Lily was leaning forward now, listening intently. I can hear it. I can hear the whistling one. For just a moment, Thomas saw something flicker across Victoria's face. Not quite a smile, but something softer. Something that looked like it might have been happiness once before life had beaten it out of her. Do you know a lot about birds? Lily asked eagerly. Thomas looked at Victoria, silently asking permission. She hesitated, then gave the tiniest nod. He took a few steps closer but didn't sit down. A little bit. I like listening to them when I walk in the park. Each one has its own personality, kind of like people. What do you mean? Lily asked. Well, robins are cheerful and friendly. They're usually the first ones singing in the morning, like they're trying to wake everyone up and say hello. Cardinals are a bit more bold and direct, and mourning doves, he paused, listening. Hear that soft cooing sound? That's a mourning dove. They sound sad, but they're actually very peaceful birds. Lily was completely focused now, her entire face alive with interest in a way that made Thomas's chest ache. This was what a child should look like. Engaged, curious, connected to the world around her. I never knew birds were so different, Lily said. I just thought they all sounded the same. Not at all. Once you start really listening, you realize each one is telling you something different. Victoria cleared her throat. That's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that with Lily. It was another dismissal, gentler this time, but still a dismissal. Thomas nodded. Of course. Enjoy your morning. He walked away, but something told him this was progress. Small, barely noticeable progress, but progress nonetheless. The next Saturday, Thomas brought his guitar. He'd debated it all week, wondering if it was too much, if he was pushing too hard. But something told him music might be the key. Music was safe. It didn't require conversation or trust. It just existed, and people could take from it what they needed. He sat on a bench about 30 feet from where Lily and Victoria usually settled. When they arrived, he waited about 10 minutes before he started playing. Nothing fancy, just some soft finger-picking, a gentle melody that floated through the morning air without demanding attention. He kept his eyes on his guitar, not wanting to make Victoria feel like he was watching them. But he could sense the change in the air. The way sound seemed to carry differently when someone was really listening. After a few minutes, he heard a small voice. Mom, do you hear that? Someone's playing music. I hear it, sweetheart. It's beautiful, Lily whispered. Thomas continued playing, letting the music speak for itself. He transitioned into another song, something a little more upbeat. His fingers moved across the strings with practiced ease, and for a moment he forgot about everything except the simple joy of making something beautiful. When he finished, there was a brief silence. Then he heard soft clapping. He looked up to see Lily applauding, a huge smile on her face. Victoria was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Surprise, maybe, or confusion, like she couldn't figure out what he wanted from them. That was amazing. Lily called out, "Can you play more?" Thomas looked at Victoria. This time he needed clear permission. Would that be all right? Victoria studied him for a long moment. He could see the war happening behind her eyes. The part of her that wanted to protect her daughter from everything and everyone, fighting against the part that remembered joy, that recognized her daughter's happiness. Finally, she spoke. Just one more song. Thomas smiled. One more song. Any requests? Something happy, Lily said immediately. Something that sounds like sunshine, Thomas laughed softly. Sunshine. I think I can do that. He played a brighter melody, something with a bounce to it, and as he played, he watched Lily's face light up like she was actually feeling the warmth she couldn't see. She swayed slightly to the rhythm, her hands tapping gently against her knees. Even Victoria seemed to relax just a fraction. Her shoulders lowered slightly, her jaw unclenched. For just a few minutes, the weight she carried seemed a little lighter. When the song ended, Thomas set his guitar aside. Thank you for letting me share that with you. Thank you for playing, Lily said. Will you be here next week? Will you play again? Thomas looked at Victoria, leaving the decision to her. She was quiet for so long that he thought she might say no. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, We're usually here around 10. It wasn't an invitation exactly, but it wasn't a rejection either. Then I'll see you next week, Thomas said. Same time, same place. As he walked away, guitar case in hand, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, not the naive kind that ignores reality, but the sturdy kind that acknowledges how hard things are and chooses to believe they can get better anyway. Behind him, he heard Lily's excited voice. Mom, did you hear how pretty that was? Did you hear it? And for the first time, he heard Victoria's response, soft but genuine. Yes, baby. I heard it. It was beautiful. Thomas smiled to himself. The walls were still there, high and thick and built from pain, but he'd found a crack. And sometimes that's all you need. Just one small crack where light can start to seep through. He'd be back next Saturday. And the Saturday after that. For as long as it took, he'd keep showing up. Because that little girl deserved someone who wouldn't give up on her. And maybe, just maybe, her mother deserved that too. 3 weeks had passed since Thomas started playing guitar in the park. What began as cautious tolerance from Victoria had slowly shifted into something that almost resembled acceptance. She no longer looked at him like he was a threat. Now she just looked tired. Tired and maybe a little bit curious about why this stranger kept showing up for a child who wasn't his. Thomas had learned to read the small signs. The way Victoria's shoulders relaxed when he played certain songs. How she arrived a few minutes earlier each week, as if she didn't want Lily to miss a single note. The way she'd started bringing an extra coffee, which she'd set on the bench beside her, never offering it directly but leaving it there like maybe, possibly it was meant for him if he wanted it. He always took it. And he always said thank you. On the 4th Saturday, something changed. Thomas was teaching Lily about the different sounds of leaves underfoot when Victoria actually spoke without being spoken to first. "You said you work with children." Thomas looked up, surprised. It was the first personal question she'd asked him. "Yes, I'm a therapist at the Children's Development Center downtown. I work with kids who have various challenges. Autism, developmental delays, sensory processing issues, things like that." Victoria's expression shifted, something guarded sliding back into place. "So you work with disabled children." There was an edge to the word disabled, like it tasted bitter in her mouth. "I work with children who experience the world differently," Thomas said carefully, "and I help them find ways to thrive in it. And you think Lily needs your help?" It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Thomas set his guitar down and gave her his full attention. This was important. "I think Lily is an amazing kid who happens to be blind. That's not the same thing as needing to be fixed." Victoria's jaw tightened. "But you think I'm doing something wrong. That's why you keep coming here. You think I'm not enough for her?" "No," Thomas said firmly. "I think you're doing everything you can. I think you love your daughter more than anything in the world. And I think you're carrying a weight that no one should have to carry alone." For a moment, Victoria looked like she might cry. Then she looked like she might tell him to leave and never come back. Instead, she did neither. She just stared at her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Her father died 2 years ago," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Car accident. We were all in the car. He died at the scene. Lily was in the hospital for 3 weeks. When she woke up, she couldn't see anymore. The doctor said the trauma to her head caused damage to her optic nerves. Permanent damage." Thomas felt the words settle heavy in his chest. "I'm so sorry." "Everyone's sorry," Victoria said, and there was that bitterness again. "Everyone's so sorry. But sorry doesn't bring him back. Sorry doesn't give Lily her sight back. Sorry doesn't change the fact that I was driving that day." There it was. The truth beneath everything, the guilt that had built those walls. "It wasn't your fault," Thomas said gently. Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. "A truck ran a red light and hit us. Logically, I know that's not my fault. But logic doesn't matter at 3 in the morning when I can't sleep because I keep replaying it. Logic doesn't matter when I look at my daughter and know that she'll never see a sunset, or her own reflection or the face of someone she loves." "Mom?" Lily's small voice cut through the tension. "Are you okay?" Victoria immediately shifted, putting on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just talking with Thomas." But Lily's face was scrunched up with concern. Even without seeing, she could sense her mother's pain. Thomas realized this probably happened a lot. Lily picking up on emotions that Victoria tried to hide. "Why don't I teach you something new today?" Thomas suggested, trying to lighten the moment. "Have you ever felt tree bark?" "Really felt it?" Lily perked up a little. "Like touched a tree?" "Exactly. Each tree has different bark. Rough or smooth, with deep grooves or shy. Low ones. Some feel like puzzle pieces, some feel like scales. It's like they each have their own fingerprint." He looked at Victoria, asking permission with his eyes. She hesitated, then nodded. Thomas stood and offered his hand to Lily. She took it without hesitation, her small fingers wrapping around his with complete trust. Victoria followed closely behind as they walked to a nearby oak tree. "Okay, reach out your hand," Thomas said, guiding Lily's palm to the rough bark. "Tell me what you feel." Lily's fingers explored the surface, her face concentrating. "It's bumpy. And rough, like Like someone carved lines in it. Perfect. That's oak bark. Now let's try this one. He led her to a birch tree a few feet away. What about this one? Lily touched it and her eyes widened. It's so different. This one is smooth and kind of peely like paper. Exactly. You're really good at this. For the next 20 minutes, they explored different trees. Lily was completely absorbed, laughing when she found one with moss growing on it, gasping when Thomas let her feel the thorns on a rose bush very carefully. She was experiencing the world in a way she'd probably never been allowed to before. Thomas glanced at Victoria and saw tears streaming silently down her face. But she wasn't looking away. She was watching her daughter with an expression of such raw pain and love that Thomas had to look away to give her privacy. When they returned to the bench, Lily was chattering excitedly about all the different textures she'd felt. Victoria wiped her eyes quickly, but Thomas pretended not to notice. "Thank you," Victoria said quietly. "For doing that with her?" "She's a natural explorer," Thomas said. "She just needs opportunities to explore." Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then so softly he almost missed it, she said, "I used to be an artist before I painted. Landscapes mostly. Trees, actually. I loved capturing the way light filtered through leaves, the texture of bark, the way roots twisted into the ground. That sounds beautiful. I haven't painted since the accident," she continued. "I couldn't. How could I paint light when my daughter would never see it? How could I create beauty when I'd taken it away from her?" "You didn't take anything from her," Thomas said. "A drunk driver took something from both of you, and I'm guessing Lily doesn't see it as something missing. She just sees it as her life. The only one she knows how to live." Victoria's breath hitched. "I've been so focused on keeping her safe that I forgot she needs more than safety. She needs a life, and I don't know how to give her that. I don't know how to let go of the fear long enough to let her really live." "You don't have to figure it all out at once," Thomas said. "Small steps, like today, letting her touch trees. That's a start. Why are you doing this?" Victoria asked suddenly, turning to look at him directly. "Why do you keep coming here? What do you want from us?" Thomas thought about how to answer that. Finally, he said, "When I was in graduate school, I had a professor who told me something I never forgot. He said the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And I can't be indifferent when I see a child who's lonely and a mother who's drowning. That's all. I'm not here because I think you're failing. I'm here because I think you're both trying so hard that you've forgotten you don't have to do it alone." Victoria looked at him for a long moment, really looked at him like she was trying to decide if she could trust what he was saying. Then she did something that shocked him. She reached over and squeezed his hand, just once, quickly, before pulling away. "Next week," she said, Would you maybe want to come earlier? Maybe we could get coffee first." "The three of us," Thomas smiled. "I'd really like that." As they said goodbye that day, Thomas watched them walk away. Victoria's hand was still firmly holding Lily's, still guiding her carefully. But there was something different in the way she moved. Something lighter. The walls were still there. They hadn't come down overnight. But more cracks were forming, and through those cracks Thomas could see glimpses of the woman Victoria used to be. The artist who painted light. The mother who smiled. She was still in there, buried under grief and guilt and fear. But she was starting to remember who she was before the accident took everything. And that, Thomas thought, was worth every Saturday morning for as long as it took. The coffee meetup never happened. At least not the way it was supposed to. Thomas arrived at the park early that Saturday, nervous in a way he hadn't expected. He'd actually changed his shirt twice that morning, which was ridiculous. This wasn't a date. It was just coffee with a mother and daughter who were slowly becoming friends. That's all. But as the minutes ticked past 10 o'clock, then 10:15, then 10:30, a knot of worry started forming in his stomach. Victoria was never late. She was the most punctual person he'd ever met, probably because she planned everything down to the minute to keep Lily safe. By 11, Thomas was genuinely concerned. He pulled out his phone, then realized he didn't have Victoria's number. They'd never exchanged contact information. Their entire relationship existed only in this park on Saturday mornings, nowhere else. He was debating whether to leave when his phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Thomas?" It was Victoria's voice, strained and shaking. "This is Victoria. I got your number from the business card you gave Lily a few weeks ago. I'm sorry, I know this is strange, but I didn't know who else to call and—" "Victoria, what's wrong? Where are you?" We're at Mercy General Hospital. Lily had a seizure this morning. We were getting ready to meet you and she just collapsed. The ambulance brought us here and they're running tests and I don't know what's happening and her voice broke. Thomas was already moving toward his car. I'm on my way. Which floor? Emergency department. But you don't have to come. I shouldn't have called. I'm already in my car, Thomas said firmly. I'll be there in 10 minutes. You're not alone, okay? You're not alone. He heard a shaky breath on the other end. Okay, thank you. The drive to the hospital felt like it took hours, even though it was only 8 minutes. Thomas found parking and rushed into the emergency department, scanning the waiting area until he spotted Victoria. She was pacing near the registration desk, her hair disheveled, still wearing the paint-stained sweater she must have thrown on in the panic of the morning. When she saw him, something in her face crumbled. Not completely, but enough that he could see just how hard she'd been holding it together. Hey, he said softly, walking up to her. I'm here. What did the doctors say? They're still running tests. E.g. CT scan, blood work. They said seizures can happen sometimes after traumatic brain injuries, even years later. They need to figure out if it's something new or just a delayed complication from the accident. She wrapped her arms around herself. I thought we were past this. I thought the worst was over. But it's never over, is it? There's always something else waiting to hurt her. Thomas guided her gently to a chair. Let's sit down. Have you eaten anything today? She shook her head. Okay. I'm going to get you some food from the cafeteria. You need to keep your strength up for Lily. I can't leave. What if they come out with news? I'll be fast. 5 minutes, and if anyone comes, I'll run back immediately. He returned with a sandwich, coffee, and a bottle of water. Victoria picked at the food without really eating it, but she drank the water. They sat in silence for a while, the sounds of the hospital filling the space between them. Beeping monitors, overhead pages, the shuffle of nurses' shoes on linoleum floors. I keep thinking this is my punishment, Victoria said suddenly, for surviving when my husband didn't, for being the one driving, for not seeing that truck coming fast enough to avoid it completely. This is the universe telling me I don't deserve peace. Thomas turned to face her fully. Can I tell you something? Something I've never told anyone except my therapist? Victoria looked at him, surprised. I had a younger sister, Grace. She was 5 years younger than me, which means I was basically her built-in babysitter growing up. When I was 16 and she was 11, she got sick. Leukemia. Aggressive, fast-moving. She fought for 2 years, but eventually... He paused, the memory still sharp after all these years. She died when she was 13. Thomas, I'm so sorry. The last week of her life, she was in the hospital, in pain, scared, wanting to go home. And I couldn't handle it. I was 18 years old, about to start college, and I just couldn't watch her suffer anymore. So I left. I told my parents I needed to go handle some college registration stuff, but really I just couldn't be there. I spent that whole day driving around, sitting in parking lots, avoiding the hospital. He took a deep breath. She died that night, while I was gone. My mom called me and I raced back, but I was too late. I never got to say goodbye because I was too much of a coward to be there when she needed me most. Victoria's eyes were filled with tears. You were just a kid. You were scared, I was. But I spent the next 5 years punishing myself for it. I dropped out of college, pushed away everyone who cared about me, convinced myself I didn't deserve to be happy when Grace never got that chance. I became a therapist because I thought if I could save enough other kids, maybe it would make up for failing my sister. What changed? Victoria asked quietly. My own therapist asked me a question that broke through everything. She said, do you think Grace would want you to suffer for the rest of your life because of one moment? And I realized the answer was no. Grace loved me. Even at 13, dying and scared, she would never have wanted me to throw away my life out of guilt. She would have wanted me to live, to be happy, to honor her memory by actually living, not just existing in some half-dead state of penance. Thomas looked directly at Victoria, making sure she heard every word. Your husband loved you, and Lily loves you. Neither of them would want you to spend the rest of your life punishing yourself for something that wasn't your fault. That's not honoring them. That's just hurting everyone, including yourself. Victoria covered her face with her hands, and this time she didn't try to hide the tears. Thomas didn't say anything else. He just sat with her, a steady presence while she finally let herself break down. Not the quiet, controlled tears she'd allowed before, but real, gut-wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. When she finally caught her breath, she wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweater. I don't know how to stop being afraid. Every moment of every day I'm terrified something else will happen. That I'll lose her too, that I'll mess up again and she'll pay the price. You can't control everything, Thomas said gently. You can't prevent every bad thing from happening. All you can do is love her the best you can and let her live her life. But what if, Mrs. Hayes? A doctor in blue scrubs approached them. We have the test results. Victoria stood so quickly she almost tripped. Thomas stood too, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. Is she okay? Victoria's voice was barely holding together. The doctor smiled, which was a good sign. Lily is fine. The seizure was a one-time event, likely triggered by not eating enough breakfast combined with exhaustion. Her brain scans show no new damage, no concerning abnormalities. We want to keep her for observation for a few more hours, but she should be able to go home this afternoon. Victoria's knees actually buckled. Thomas caught her, holding her up as relief flooded through her. She's okay, Victoria whispered. She's really okay. Can I see her? Of course. Follow me. They walked down the hallway together, and when they reached Lily's room, Thomas started to hang back. I'll wait in the hall. Give you two some time, but Victoria grabbed his hand. Come in, please. You're part of this now. Lily was sitting up in the hospital bed, looking small but alert. When she heard them enter, her face lit up. Mom, Thomas. I knew you'd both be here. Victoria rushed to her side, hugging her carefully but tightly. Baby, you scared me so much. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean to. The doctor said I just need to eat better breakfast and not stay up so late reading my Braille books. Thomas smiled at that. Of course Lily was staying up late reading. She was curious, hungry for stories and knowledge and all the things she'd been kept from experiencing. Victoria pulled back and looked at her daughter. Really looked at her. And Thomas saw something shift in her expression. Maybe it was the scare of almost losing her. Maybe it was exhaustion finally breaking through her defenses. Maybe it was everything they'd talked about in the waiting room. But whatever it was, something fundamental had changed. Lily, Victoria said softly. When we get home, I want to talk about some things. About school and friends and doing more activities. You're right. You need more than what I've been giving you. You need a real life, not just a safe one. Lily's face transformed with hope. Really, you mean it? I mean it. I've been so scared of losing you that I forgot you need to actually live. And I'm sorry for that. Lily threw her arms around her mother's neck. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. So much. Thomas watched from the doorway, feeling his throat tighten. This was the moment. The crack in the wall had finally become an opening. Not everything would be perfect from here. Victoria would still struggle with fear. Lily would still face challenges. But they were going to be okay. They were finally going to be okay. 2 months had passed since the hospital scare, and the world looked different now. Or at least Victoria's view of it did. Thomas stood in the community center's auditorium, watching parents and students file in for the winter showcase. He'd gotten the invitation 3 weeks ago, hand-delivered by Lily herself, written in Braille with a printed translation attached. Please come see my art show. You have to be there. Love, Lily. He'd marked it on his calendar immediately. Now, looking around the decorated space, he felt a swell of pride that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with what Victoria had managed to do. After that day in the hospital, she'd kept her promise. Within a week, she'd enrolled Lily in the Riverside School for the Blind, a place where children learned skills for independent living, received proper education, and most importantly, made friends. Victoria had been terrified that first day. Thomas knew because she'd called him at 6 a.m, panicking about whether she was making the right choice. He'd talked her through it, reminded her that Lily needed this, and promised to be there when she picked Lily up that afternoon. That first day had turned into a week, then a month, and now Lily had been at the school for 8 weeks. The change in her was remarkable. Thomas. He turned to see Lily navigating through the crowd with her cane, moving with a confidence he'd never seen before. Behind her, another girl around the same age followed, chattering excitedly. Hey, Lily, you made it through that crowd like a pro. Lily beamed. I've been practicing. Oh, this is my best friend, Maya. Maya, this is Thomas, the one I told you about. The guitar guy. Maya, who was also blind, grinned. Oh yeah, the park guy. Lily talks about you all the time. Only good things, I hope, Thomas said, shaking Maya's hand. Mostly. She did mention you're terrible at describing colors, though. Thomas laughed. That's fair. I'm working on it. Come on, Lily said, tugging his hand. You have to see my sculpture before everyone else gets here. Well, not CC, but you know what I mean. She led him to a display table where several clay sculptures were arranged. Hers was in the center, about a foot tall. It was a bird, clearly recognizable despite the childish imperfections in the clay. The wings were spread wide, the head tilted upward, and there was something about the pose that suggested freedom, movement, life. Lily, this is incredible, Thomas said, genuinely impressed. Is this a robin? Yes. I made it after all those mornings listening to them in the park. My teacher helped me understand the shape, but I did all the forming myself. I used my hands to remember what wings feel like, what a beak feels like, and I listened to recordings to remember the feeling of their songs. The feeling of their songs? Thomas asked. Yeah, songs have feelings, not just sounds. The robin's song feels like sunshine on your face, so I tried to make the bird look like it's singing into the sun. Thomas felt his chest tighten with emotion. This was what happened when you let a child's potential unfold. This was what Victoria had been keeping locked away, trying so hard to protect that she'd almost smothered it completely. Where is your mom? He asked. Lily's expression flickered with something uncertain. She's here. She's been weird all day, though, quiet. I think she's nervous. Nervous about what? You'll see, Lily said mysteriously. It's a surprise, but a good one, I think. Before Thomas could ask more questions, the lights flickered, signaling the start of the showcase. He found a seat as families settled in around him. The principal gave a brief welcome speech, then began introducing students and their work. When it was Lily's turn, she walked confidently to the front with Maya by her side. She talked about her sculpture, about learning to translate sound into shape, about how birds represented freedom to her. The audience applauded warmly, and Thomas felt ridiculously proud, like a parent watching their own child succeed. But then the principal spoke again. We have one more special presentation tonight. Parents, you know we've been encouraging you to participate in our family art program, where you create something alongside your children. Tonight, one of our parents has decided to share her work publicly for the first time in several years. Please welcome Victoria Hayes. Thomas sat up straighter, his heart suddenly pounding. Victoria walked slowly to the front, carrying a canvas. Even from his seat, Thomas could see her hands shaking. She set the canvas on an easel, but kept it turned away from the audience. I used to be a painter, she began, her voice soft but steady. Before my husband died and my daughter lost her sight in an accident, I painted all the time. Mostly landscapes, trees, light, nature. But after the accident, I couldn't paint anymore. Every time I picked up a brush, all I could see was what my daughter would never see. It felt cruel to create visual beauty when Lily would never experience it. She paused, taking a shaky breath. Lily, sitting in the front row with Maya, reached out her hand. Victoria stepped down briefly to squeeze it, then returned to the easel. But my daughter taught me something over these past few months. She taught me that beauty isn't just visual. She experiences the world in ways I never considered. Through touch, through sound, through feeling. She taught me that I wasn't creating art for her to see. I was creating it as an expression of love, of life, of the fact that we're still here and still capable of making beautiful things even after terrible things happen. Victoria turned the canvas around. The painting took Thomas's breath away. It was the park, their park, but not as most people would see it. The trees were rendered in rich textures that seemed to leap off the canvas, each bark pattern meticulously detailed. In the foreground, a small figure sat on a bench, her face tilted upward, and above her birds filled the sky in an explosion of movement and life. The whole piece seemed to pulse with sound, with feeling, with the essence of everything they'd experienced together over those Saturday mornings. This is called learning to see, Victoria said, because my daughter has been teaching me how to see the world differently, how to see what really matters. And I painted this with the hope that maybe someday I can help her see it too, not with her eyes, but with her heart. The applause was immediate and thunderous. Victoria's eyes were shining with tears, but she was smiling. Really smiling. Not the sad, broken smile Thomas had seen that first day in the park, but something genuine and alive. After the showcase, people crowded around Victoria, complimenting her work. Thomas hung back, not wanting to intrude on her moment. But eventually the crowd thinned and she spotted him. "You came," she said, walking over. "I wouldn't have missed it. Victoria, that painting. I don't even have words." "It's because of you," she said. "You showed me how to start living again, how to let Lily live. You gave us both permission to be more than just survivors of something terrible. You did that yourself." "I just played some guitar." Victoria laughed softly. "You did so much more than that. You saw us when we were invisible. You cared when you had no reason to. You kept showing up." She paused, her expression turning more serious. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Would you like to get dinner sometime?" "Just the two of us, I mean. Lily's been asking me for weeks when I'm going to stop being stubborn and ask you out properly." Thomas felt his face warm. "Your 8-year-old daughter told you to ask me out?" "She's very wise beyond her years. And honestly, she's not wrong. I'd like to get to know you better. Outside the park. Outside the role of the guy who helped us. Just as Thomas. If you're interested." "I'm very interested," Thomas said, his smile growing. "How about next Saturday? We could finally have that coffee we planned before the hospital happened." "Saturday sounds perfect." Lily appeared between them, somehow sensing the moment. "Did you ask him? What did he say?" "He said yes," Victoria told her daughter. "Finally." Lily threw her hands up dramatically. "You two have been making googly eyes at each other for months. It was getting painful to listen to." "We were not making googly eyes," Victoria protested, but she was laughing. "You totally were," Maya chimed in, appearing beside Lily. "Even I could tell, and I can't even see." Thomas laughed, feeling lighter than he had in years. This wasn't how he'd expected his Saturday mornings in the park to end. He'd just wanted to help a lonely child. He'd never imagined he'd find a family in the process, but life had a funny way of surprising you. You start by showing up for someone else and end up finding exactly what you needed for yourself. As they walked out of the community center together, Victoria's hand somehow found his. It was tentative, uncertain, but real. Lily walked ahead with Maya, the two girls laughing about something only they understood, their canes tapping in synchronized rhythm. The frozen walls around Victoria's heart hadn't just cracked, they'd melted, completely, revealing something warm and alive and ready to love again. Not because her pain had disappeared, but because she'd finally learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to carry your grief while still making room for joy. And joy, Thomas thought as he watched Lily spin in a circle with her arms out wide, was exactly what they all deserved. The park would still be there next Saturday. The birds would still sing. The trees would still stand tall. But now, when they visited, it wouldn't be as broken people seeking refuge. It would be as a family, finding beauty in a world that was finally, wonderfully full of possibility again.